Back in 1985, a high-stakes corporate showdown went down that, well, it completely rewrote the rulebook for business warfare. We're talking about a battle between Unocal and Mesa Petroleum, and it created this powerful and pretty controversial new weapon for companies under attack. This is the story of how that weapon got made.
So, put yourself in this situation. Imagine you're on the board of a huge corporation. Out of nowhere, a famous corporate raider just blows right past you, making a public bid to take control by going straight to your shareholders. He's literally trying to buy the company right out from under you. What do? That was the exact nightmare the board of Unocal was facing.
All right, so in one corner, you've got Unocal, this giant in the oil industry. And in the other corner, Mesa Petroleum, led by a truly notorious corporate raider who's getting ready to launch a hostile bid for a company many, many times its size.
Now here's the thing. This attack wasn't some random shot in the dark. Mesa wasn't just some outsider. Nope. They had already been quietly buying up Unocal stock, getting themselves a 13% stake. They had a serious foothold inside the company before they even launched their main assault.
So Mesa pulls out its weapon of choice, something called a two-tiered tender offer. Now this is a pretty nasty tactic, and it's designed to do one thing and one thing only: put an insane amount of pressure on shareholders to sell their stock, and to do it fast.
So here's how the trap was set. The front end was the bait, a cash offer of $54 per share. Sounds pretty good, right? But it was only for the first 37% of shares tendered. Anyone who is too slow, anyone left holding stock after that, the back end, well, they'd be forced to trade their valuable shares for a pile of super risky, low-value junk bonds. It was engineered to cause a panic, a stampede, forcing shareholders to scramble to sell just to avoid getting stuck with, financial garbage.
Okay, so before we see how Unocal punches back, let's hit pause for a sec. We need a quick tactical briefing. To really get what's happening in this war, you've got to understand the weapons being used.
First up, a hostile takeover. It's pretty much what it sounds like. The key word here is hostile, because the target company's board is totally against the deal. The attacker is trying to force the acquisition against their will. It's a fight.
And how do you pull off a hostile takeover? Well, your main weapon is the tender offer. This is where the acquirer just bypasses the board completely and goes straight to the company's real owners, the shareholders. They make a public offer to buy their stock, usually for more than it's currently worth on the market.
Okay, so Mesa has launched its coercive two-tier attack. Unocal's board is backed into a corner, so what are they going to do? They don't just roll over. They decide to fight back, and they do it with a bold and, at the time, completely untested defensive strategy.
First things first, Unocal's board, with their financial advisors backing them up, officially shot down the offer. And they didn't just say, no thanks. They called it completely inadequate and a real threat to their shareholders, arguing those back-end junk bonds were pretty much worthless.
And this is where Unocal gets really, really clever. They launched their own offer to buy back stock from their shareholders. The price? A whopping $72 per share, which just blows Mesa's $54 offer out of the water. But here's the twist, the absolute killer move. Their offer explicitly excluded Mesa Petroleum. Unocal was flat out refusing to buy back any shares from the very raider who was trying to take them over.
And how did Unocal spin this publicly? It was simple, really. They framed it as a rescue mission. They argued the whole point of their move was to provide shareholders with an adequate alternative so they wouldn't be forced into accepting Mesa's junk bonds.
So, Mesa, you can bet they were absolutely furious. They were being shut out of this incredibly lucrative deal. So what do? They sue Unocal immediately, arguing that this selective defense was discriminatory and just plain illegal. The fight now spills out of the boardroom and into the Delaware Supreme Court.
And this all boiled down to one huge, fundamental question that the court had to answer. Can a company's board play favorites like this? Can they make a generous offer to buy back shares from everyone except the guy trying to take them over? The answer to this was going to set a massive precedent for all of corporate America.
You could feel the entire business world just holding its breath. The Delaware Supreme Court's decision wasn't just about this one deal. It was about to define the rules of engagement for every takeover battle in the future. A whole new legal standard was about to be born.
So, the big question, did the court side with Unocal? The answer was a huge yes. But, and trust me, this is a really big but, it came with some very important strings attached. A board couldn't just do whatever it wanted to hold on to power. They had to prove their actions were totally justified.
And that but led the court to create this brand new two-part test, which we now famously call the Unocal standard. First, the board has to prove there's a legitimate threat to the company. They can't just be trying to protect their own jobs. And second, whatever defensive move they make has to be proportional to that threat. You can't bring a cannon to a knife fight.
Okay, so let's run the Unocal Mesa situation through this new test, right? First prong, was there a real threat? Oh yeah. The court found that Mesa's coercive two-tier offer was definitely a real danger to Unocal shareholders. So, check. Second prong, was the response proportional? Yes, again. The court's logic was that if Unocal had included Mesa in its generous $72 buyback, it would basically be using its own money to help finance Mesa's attack. The defense fit the crime.
And just like that, the entire game of corporate takeovers was changed forever. The Unocal standard gave corporate boards a clear legal playbook to fight back against hostile takeovers. It gave them the power to use defensive measures, as long as they could prove they were acting in the best interest of the company and its shareholders. But this whole story leaves us with this massive question, one that people in boardrooms are still arguing about today. The Unocal standard gives boards some pretty powerful weapons, but where is the line between protecting the company from a real threat and simply protecting their own jobs, between protection and entrenchment? That question is still at the very heart of corporate governance.